Hey everyone, and welcome back to my top 500 games, and we are currently at number 195, and that is Sengoku Basara Samurai Heroes. Now, this is a game in the Musou style. I would say like the warrior style, like Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors and all that, but apparently it's called Musou, the category of game that it belongs in. Now, this game in particular is a Capcom game, and it takes place in Japan, like as you would expect with Samurai Warriors. After all, the phrase Samurai Heroes is in the title, but it's not exactly Samurai Warriors. It does have that basic formula that you'd expect from these types of games, and that is that you are one character and you have an arena of many different enemies, and you hack and slash them away and they die really quickly. And of course you'll have enemy officers which take a bit more in order to be able to kill them. Now, in this game, each character does have their own specific story mode that you take them through, and through that you'll be gathering different resources that you will find along the way. One of the things I remember about this game is that sometimes you'll have enemies that are sort of inside this contraption, so you have to attack the contraption and it will explode or something strange like that. And something that actually rather annoyed me about this game is that, and I suppose this is only a small thing, is that when you pause the game, you have to press start to unpause the game. You can't just press circle to get out of the menu, because you press start to get into the menu, and usually in these games I'll just press circle to exit out, but you can't do that. You have to press start, and that caught me off guard so many times. I know it sounds like such a small thing, but it's something that over and over again I kept trying to press circle, and I was like, oh, you've got to press start to get out. Number 194 is Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. This is a GameCube game, and I actually got this game in the big box rather than the regular box, because this was one of those games where you could attach your Game Boy Advance to the console and use your Game Boy Advance as a controller. And I know this was a very GameCube type thing, and they did this quite a lot with the GameCube, but the best way that I can describe this game is that it's a series of levels. It takes place in this sort of hack and slash type format, I suppose, although you do have the magic spells that you would expect in a Final Fantasy game, and you do have all the different monsters that you would expect in Final Fantasy games, like you've got the Tomberries and the Malboros and all that. But the gimmick of this game is that the world is taken over by all this miasma, and you have to carry this crystal thing around with you in order to be able to walk through the different areas. Now, depending on how many people you're playing with, sometimes it will be that one character will have to carry this thing around with you and everyone else can then go and fight, or possibly you can have a Moogle carry it for you, and the Game Boy Advance controller is used as a map thing, and I did use it. Now, the way that I remember this game works in terms of leveling, which you would expect from a Final Fantasy game, it's more so that when you complete a level, you will have a list of options of upgrades that you can choose. So it might be a boost to your strength or a boost to some other stat, and that pool of buffs, or boosts rather, you will have access to that same select pool every time that you replay and recomplete the stage, apart from when you select one, that will be gone from the next time you play through. So say if it's like 8 or something, it means you can play the level 8 times to get all of the rewards for it. I may be mistaken there, it's been a long time since I've played or even seen this game, so I may be making an error there, I don't know. Number 193 is Spyro 2 Gateway to Glimmer, or as it's known in America as Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage. And this is the second game in the Spyro the Dragon series. If you couldn't tell by the number 2, I don't know why I had to explain that. But the basics of how Spyro works is that you play as Spyro, who's a dragon, and you can't fly as this dragon, only in select stages, but you can glide, and your main forms of attacks are charging and breathing fire, and you'll have different enemies that require different attacks to be able to destroy. So you might have large enemies which you can't charge into, or they might have this protective armor, which fire wouldn't work against that. But you've always got these things to collect, like you've got gems, which is a staple of the Spyro series. But this game introduced a few characters, and it also introduced Moneybags, who everyone knows. And Moneybags, basically what he does is, at several points in the game, he will stop you and say, give me some money and I will give you this ability, or I will open this bridge for you, or whatever. And so that's how you progress through the different stages. You need to get enough gems in order to be able to pay money bags. Now, the aim of Spyro 2 is to get as many orbs as you can and as many of the talismans as you can. And each of the worlds in this game are based on different seasons. And the first two worlds, each level will have orbs and each level will have talismans. So you collect the talisman for completing the level properly, and then you collect the orbs by fulfilling different tasks that different NPCs will ask you to do. And then when you get to the third world, which is the winter world, there aren't any more talismans, so suddenly each level just has orbs to it. And this is a very strange game to talk about because, for one, this is a game that I had, but I think my disc broke, so I wasn't eventually able to play it anymore. Not so much that it physically broke, but it just stopped working for some reason. And also, I have some sort of vague memory of playing this game in black and white. It may have been an NTSC copy that I had copied, so I don't know why that was. I do believe I did play this game in colour at some point, but I have this vague memory of playing it in black and white. I think I had it in black and white and then I eventually got it in colour. It's a strange thing, and it's a strange game to talk about because it's strange how little I remember of it when thinking back to it. Number 192 is Clunor 2, Lunatia's Veil. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but is it Lunaties or Lunatias? I don't know. But the story is that I got this game on PS2 shortly after I got my PS3, or maybe about the same time, or maybe a little bit before. But I remember I played this game late 2008, about November, which was shortly after I got my PS3. And I played this game probably on my PS3 because I had a 60GB backwards compatible PS3 at the time. And the best way that I can describe this game, I suppose, is that it's a 2.5D platformer. And by 2.5D, what I mean is that it plays as if it's a 2D game, but graphically things will swerve around and go in and out, but it still plays like a 2D game, although there are parts where you'll have to like aim a shot at something towards you or away from you, like in and out of the screen rather than just side to side, which is also interesting. Generally, you have this ability to make a little zap which will allow you to grab these enemies, and you can use that to make a sort of extra high double jump. And so the enemies were kind of used in this puzzle sort of way, where they weren't just an obstacle that you had to get past or you just had to get rid of them. You had to use them as well in order to be able to reach certain areas. And that was quite interesting. The one thing that I thought was quite funny about this game, and it's not something that's a big deal or anything, or something that people would really notice, but at the time it was just something that I noticed, and I just thought, isn't that weird? I thought, isn't it weird how you got this one level where it's like a factory and there's like a countdown to an explosion and you have to escape from the area before the countdown reaches 0 and before it explodes. But if you get caught in the explosion, what will happen is Klonoa will sort of spin around on the spot and then get dizzy and then fall over. And I'm thinking, that wouldn't happen in an explosion. That's silly. But, you know, it's a silly PS2 platformer game, I suppose. Actually, one story I should mention about this that I completely forgot about, that I've just remembered right now, is that when I got my PS2, it came with a demo disc, and I found a few games on that demo disc. And one of those games was Clunor 2, and it was the first level of Clunor 2, where it's all rainy and you are around this castle, or maybe a lighthouse or something. Memory's a bit vague there. I remember it's rainy, it's all got loads of bricks everywhere, and it's like you're surrounded by water. And so this was one of the few games that introduced me to the PS2, for, you know, when I got my PS2, and one of the early games that made me see what PS2 graphics was like. But I can't believe I forgot about that story until just now. Number 191 is Riptide GP2, and I recognise this is the third game in a row that is the second in the series. That's strange, but purely coincidental. This game is a racing game, it's a jet ski game basically, and you've got this series of races, and it's basically like a mobile game. It very much fits the mobile game setup, you know, where you've got a series of levels, and each level has 3 stars that you can earn, so you have to earn stars, and you can use those stars to unlock new levels and stuff. And you can also level up by doing races, and you can win money by doing races. I actually got this bundled with Beach Buggy Racing, which I talked about ages ago, but I played this game on Boxing Day, mostly, of 2015. I didn't get it for Christmas. I don't think I did, at least. I maybe bought it on Christmas or bought it around that time, but I remember playing this game. I remember just staying in my room, and I had the big box of jelly beans that I'd been given for Christmas the day before. If you come from a country that doesn't celebrate Boxing Day is basically the day after Christmas. So I played this game, and I did do quite a bit of grinding because you do need money and levels in order to be able to upgrade your jet ski. And I quite like the format in how it works, and I think this is becoming a more common thing in that you have a series of different vehicles that you can buy in set order, and there's an obvious tiering system from the bottom to the top, but also each of those vehicles also has their own stats that you have to level up, and whether that be through leveling up just by doing races and stuff, or by spending money. The concept is that you have to either spend money in order to be able to get something better so that you can then earn more money, or save up your money so that then you can afford something better than that. But of course you're going to be earning money slower because you haven't upgraded to a faster jet ski. Also, what this game did was a lot of tricks. You also had to upgrade tricks as you leveled up as well, and you spent points to learn different tricks. And there were certain tiers of tricks, and the way that you activated them was by using the 2 analog sticks on the PS4. It's a PS4 game, by the way. I'm sure it's like all over the consoles and Steam and all that as well, but I played it on PS4, and you have to use both those analog sticks to push them into different directions. So it may be that you push them both up, or it may be that you push one up and one down, or like inwards or outwards, and that will do some sort of trick. And the higher tier tricks, you would have various different stages to your tricks. It would take more analog movement in order to get them completely done, and I didn't have a problem with this. Like I always say, I always generally have a problem when it comes to button combination, when it comes to that style of input, but with this I kind of just got used to it. And it also worked on a sort of degrading system, where if you used one trick more than once in a race, the effectiveness of that trick would go down over time, so you'd get less and less points for doing it. And the reason you'd want to do tricks is so that you can get this turbo bar so that you could zoom forward. And so I would play through the level, and I would just sort of get into this flow where I was going around and I would think to myself, right, da da da, and I would think of like the different tricks in my mind, and I could do the button combinations. I didn't really have a problem with it. I remember there's an episode of The Final Bosman where he talks about Riptide GP2. He talks about how bad it is, and I think Total Biscuit also once ripped on this game, no pun intended there, but he also ripped on this game as well, saying, oh, it's very basic. But to be honest, for the one day and the bit that I played this, because I did play it pretty much entirely on Boxing Day, it was how I spent my Boxing Day, I enjoyed it over that time. Number 190 is Lemmings. This was one of the very first games I got. In fact, I believe this was technically the very first game I ever got. I don't think it was the first game I played, but in 1992, I believe it was, when I got my Amiga for Christmas. Amazing how we jumped from Christmas 2015 in the previous game to Christmas of 1992 in this game. But yeah, I got my Amiga Christmas 1992, and with the Amiga came bundled with it Lemmings, and I played Lemmings. So this is the original Lemmings, and I've talked about other Lemmings previous to this, but this was where I was introduced to the concept of Lemmings. And although, like I said, not the very first game I played, but on the very first day that I played games, I played this game. And so I've described Lemmings a few times. You've got the different levels where you have the Lemmings pop out and they'll just walk forward. You have to select different roles for them to do, and then you can click on them and they will continue on doing that job that you've assigned to them, whether it's digging through walls, or digging through the ground, or mining, or building, or setting them off to explode, or giving them an umbrella so that they can fall safely from high distances. And so you had different difficulty settings. So the very first difficulty setting was fun mode, and in fun mode you started off with very, very basic levels. For example, the first level of fun mode is called Just Dig, and the only type of lemming that you have is a digger. You can't fail it unless you either explode all your lemmings or just wait around for the time to run out, or if you get them to the bottom part of the level and you just make them dig through the floor so that they fall into the river. But the concept is basically just you dig through the first part of the floor and then all the lemmings will get to the end. And then the second level is something like use floaters for this. So you'll have the lemmings drop out and you basically just have to give them umbrella one by one so they'll all fall down to safety and they'll all be able to walk into their home all nice and safely. But then the third level would be use blockers here. So you'd have a series of levels which is very designated to using specific types of lemmings. Just it's a sort of teaching tool as to how to use each individual one. And I also remember that this game used a lot of very classical music. Obviously not the original rendition because it's an Amiga. It had to use the Amiga sound fonts and all that to be able to create these music. But of course I didn't recognise that there were pieces of classical music until I think my dad might have pointed out it to me. Like for example the first level uses the can and you've also got one which I think uses like the Nutcracker and you've got Swan Lake and there's also other tracks like How Much Is That Doggy in the Window. I also remember there was a 2-player mode in this game as well, and the way that 2 players worked is that you each had your own set of lemmings, and I don't remember whether or not if it was competitive, so you had to save your lemmings better than the other person, or you had to save your lemmings with your partner to save a total percentage of lemmings. I don't remember, but I do remember that your opponent's lemmings, or the player 2's lemmings rather, the colours are inverted, so instead of having a blue shirt and green hair, they'd have a green shirt and blue hair. And I don't know where this comes from, but I sort of grew this understanding. Now, this has been long abolished within my mind. I have never thought about this since, but I have this memory of playing 2 players on Lemmings, or at least trying it out, and it being just the first level of 1 player, but with 2 players controlling it. Now, that memory has to be false. I believe it must be a false memory. It must just be me with my very young mind being confused and not understanding, you know, just basic game options and stuff. But that's the memory that I have. And so I sort of gained this understanding, so to speak, that whenever you played a game 2 players for the first time, it would be different from how that game would usually be 2 players. And I sort of got this idea in my head, and then I eventually just stopped and thought, why did I ever think that? It's just one of those things that you sort of like believe as a kid that you've got no real evidence for, but you just sort of believe it. Like, also when I was young, I didn't understand the concept of change when it came to money, but I'm not going to go into that now. But I will talk about some of the different levels apart from just the early ones on fun mode. Because when you go through the different difficulty settings, so you can choose fun, and then there's tricky, and taxing, and then mayhem. And I remember trying tricky and having some problems with it, and I don't remember anything about the start of taxing. But mayhem, the first level of mayhem, I'm going to have to like look up a video or something, because at the start of that level I just remember looking at it and thinking, what? Because you start and it's like you have to save like a really high percentage of lemmings, but you only get like a few lemmings, and maybe you have to save 2 or something, I don't know. But you start with your lemmings falling to their death because their drop is too high from the start, and then you got this kind of like this maze made out of metallic blocks that you can't destroy, and you start at the left, and so you have to kind of go like down and then up and then round, and I'm just thinking, and this is me being as young as I was, this is ridiculous. How you ever meant to do that? Maybe now I could look at it and figure it out, but back then I didn't have a clue. Of course, I was 4 years old. There was no way I would. But even over the years of having an Amiga, and you know, I didn't have the Amiga for that long, but even then I just didn't even bother. There are actually 2 variations of Lemmings, I believe, where the first level of Mayhem is different on both of them. I know there's one variation of Lemmings where the first level on Mayhem, it's kind of like this metallic maze, apart from it's rather symmetrical and everything's like on the inside and you've got to try to get them out. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the one where everyone starts at the left and you've got to try to get to the right. But one last thing I want to mention about this game is that the different levels that you went through, sometimes you would come across another level which is kind of like a a reprise, is it called, or a reprieve? I don't know, but something like that, where you have the same level, as in it's set up and it looks the same, everything's structured the same, but you'll have different requirements, you'll have different resources, and so you went through different levels, which were the same level, so to speak, but it was set up differently, so you had to work things out differently. And the one that I always hated the most, not necessarily the hardest, but one that I always found the most annoying, and I think a lot of people might agree with me on this, is that there's one particular brand of level where you've only got diggers, that is the diggers that go downwards, and you've got two platforms, this very long platform at the bottom where the end is, and this very long platform at the top where they all start, and the gap is so small that you have to make a lemming dig, but you can't have more than one lemming fall down the same hole because that small difference is the difference between life and death. So you have to get every lemming to dig through the floor, but you have to get them all to dig their own individual hole. It's really, really tricky when you get to the late stages and you've got like 30 lemmings or however many lemmings, and you have to make sure that you click on each one individually. There's no challenge to it mentally. You have to make sure that you click on them all individually, and you also have to make sure that you make them dig as far to the right as you can so that you can fit them all on. Like there's some of them where you have to really like, get to the very edge, like okay, you dig there, and then the next one along you dig right next to them, and the next one you dig right next to them. If any of you know the level or the level structure that I'm talking about and you find it as annoying as I did, please let me know. But I'm going to end this part here.